Here on election eve, in an interesting election and an important election, but one that doesn't get the attention that a presidential election gets. And we have two guests joining us this evening, Ray Holman from the UAW, and also we have John Lindstrom from Gongwer. And they are two people very knowledgeable about what's happening. And I would really just like to start by asking, I'll ask John first and then Ray, if you wouldn't mind, just give me your thumbnail sketch of what you think has been the last minute momentum. Is there any last minute momentum in one direction or another? Are things changing? Is it already in the bag? Have so many votes gone in early balloting and
if there's any momentum, I think it's towards greater confusion as to what's going to happen. The expectation is that in the gubernatorial race that Governor Snyder still has a slight edge. It will depend, obviously, a great deal on what turnout is, and one of the questions that has to be asked, and we'll get into this, is whether or not the Democratic strategy of promoting absent voters in some respects front ends people that would have showed up tomorrow, and whether or not the absolute total of Democratic voters is significantly different.
Because we did see a bump.
We did see a bump. Obviously, Mark Schauer has been, the Democrat has been focusing his attention on the Democratic areas, as one might expect. Governor Snyder has been focusing his areas on the Republican areas, as one might expect. A friend of mine who's an assistant clerk down in the Detroit area in a community that's more Republican-leaning said they have not seen any real change in absentee voters coming in at this point compared to 4 years ago. But as I say, that's in a Republican area, a Republican community. In terms of the U.S. Senate race, I would be extraordinarily surprised if Gary Peters does not win the race and win it fairly easily.
Yeah, that one we seem to think is not really up for grabs. In fact, we don't see any national discussion about how that one might change.
No. If the Republicans take the U.S. Senate, and the betting right now is they will, they're not going to get it from Michigan, it appears.
Right.
In terms of the other statewide races, I think Bill Schuette gets reelected as Attorney General. I think Ruth Johnson gets reelected as Secretary of State, but she might have a little tougher race. The legislature, there's some real concern apparently on the part of Republicans that the House may flip.
I'm seeing talk of that, and it surprised me.
Surprises me too. It is, if there's anything that is, to go back to your original point, any kind of initial momentum that may be surprising, that may be it. Now, would surprise me. It's still a long shot. It's a very big long shot. And the way you put it down and you throw it on the table and you look at it, the Republicans could still gain a couple of seats too.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but right now there's a lot of worry. They're putting a lot of money into a lot of seats that they didn't think they were going to have to before. The Democrats are putting up a tougher fight. On the Senate side in Michigan, the Republicans will continue to control the Senate. The big question is, are the Democrats going to get to big number 13? And what that means for people that have real lives and normal lives and don't worry about such things is, in the Senate, the Republicans have a supermajority. They can give a bill immediate effect with, right. They can pass a constitutional amendment, and the Democrats, they don't even have to bother to show up. They can just sit in the caucus room and drink coffee and
they
play
were
video
relevant
games
to the process
all
the way through.
If they get to 13, then that means they have blocked that supermajority, and at least in some respects they have to be dealt with.
Very interesting, very interesting.
You know, John, I was talking to a friend, I was telling Bonnie this earlier, from southeast Michigan, fairly wealthy area. He's somewhat liberal, but he has many, many conservative friends. And he said the conservative friends are mostly upset with Snyder because of what he did to the pensions. For some reason, pensions, have you heard that they're like sacrosanct? You don't mess with people's pensions.
There's a lot of upsetness about, nobody really complains about, even the Democrats don't really complain about the corporate income tax. People acknowledge that the value-based tax system that we've been using for 40 years, first through the single business tax and then through the Michigan business tax, needed to be replaced, needed to be changed. So that it isn't so much that we went to a corporate income tax that bothers people. It's how we had to balance it.
Yeah.
And that bothers them the most, because a lot of people do feel even if you agree intellectually with the argument that pretty much everybody should pay tax, and I happen to be one of those people that kind of agrees that everyone should pay tax, there's a lot of people just feel this was the wrong way to go about it. Now there's some problems with trying to phase it in because of our constitutional prohibition on a graduated income tax if you would try to do something like that. So, but that is one area where people are upset with the governor. And in some respects, I think lately, since we've gotten into so much confusion about whether he did or whether he didn't cut school funding, and if so, how and when and what does it matter, the pension tax aspect, I think, has been Mark Schauer's strongest argument right now. I think the point also needs to be made, this has been more, from the Democratic standpoint, Ray may disagree, but from the Democratic standpoint, this has been more of an anti-Snyder election than a pro-Schauer election.
Ray, do you agree or disagree?
You know, I think that Governor Snyder has managed to offend almost every group in Michigan, so in some ways John's correct. And by the way, it's quite an honor to be on the same show with the best newsman in town. I better be careful what I say, because you can fact check me. But I think that...
no,
John,
you don't get a discount. So.
But,
2 for 1.
But I think that the pension tax is really resonating. And it's a little more complicated. It kind of depends who qualifies for it, what their date of birth is. But generally, I think you're right, Bill. I think when you start going after pensions, that's something that touches a nerve. And if the absentee ballots are up, I think that's going to be a significant factor. I can kind of tell you more of a perspective from being on the ground. I've been on doors and out getting the vote out and meeting with my members. There does seem to be more energy this time around. It's an off-year election, but compared to 2010, people are much more upbeat. There's almost a anxious anger, I would say, to send a message to this governor.
Fear and anger usually fuel people to get out and vote, sometimes more than because they're going for a positive agenda. And of course the Tea Party has had a lot of energy over the years, and I don't know, is the governor counting on a strong Tea Party vote? Because he doesn't seem their man, so.
The governor is trying very hard not to offend elements within the party that he doesn't really feel like he can afford to lose right now. Yeah, there's no question the Tea Party doesn't like Governor Snyder.
Yeah.
They would, I suppose, if they had their druthers, they would want somebody else altogether. If it's between the governor and Mark Schauer, they probably will go with the governor. Although some have said there's no difference between them, so who cares?
The big issue is whether they stay home.
That's partly it. You do obviously have 3 people who are running for the House who are they're so Tea Party to the right, they're to the right of the Tea Party, and probably make the Tea Party look liberal. Gary Glenn is one, Todd Corser, and Cindy Gamrot.
Yeah.
There is some concern and speculation, presuming they win, they probably will, although Democrats are putting in a tougher fight, at least in the Todd Corser and Gary Glenn areas, that they could, even though there's just 3 of them, they could sort of be an area where maybe they'll pull more Republicans towards them if people get afraid. It's hard to say. For those of us who are ancient, there were 3 no votes, consistent no votes in the House back in the 80s and the early 90s. One of them was now current Congressman Tim Walberg, and there was a guy named Mike Nye, and there was a woman named Margaret O'Connor. And Mike Nye finally decided he was tired of being considered just an irrelevant no vote, and he got very involved in corrections issues and did a very, very good job as chair of the corrections committee for the House. Margaret was a very, very sweet woman, but she just did not believe in government doing things, and so that's sort of where we know that Walberg is now in Congress. But they were sort of they got to be sort of a nullity, and whenever the Republicans needed to go on something, if it was going to be down to 1 or 2 votes, they knew they were going to have to go to the Democrats to try to find them, because they could not get them from those 3.
They played the Ted Cruz role.
Right. So the question comes down to, will that happen again?
Yeah.
Or will will Courser, Glenn, and Gamrot, presuming they're elected, will they be more active and try to draw more people their way?
Well, our third guest tonight was going to be Emily Devendorf of Michigan Equality, but because of the Gary Glenn race, she's up there doing Get Out the Vote all the way up to the last minute. They're making a major push because obviously for their issues, those candidates would be a real problem, so they're trying to forestall that. I think they're, one of the dangers, of course, when you have this is that you energize the other side at the same time, and have people who are extreme. So what are you seeing out there in terms of that Tea Party effect, Ray?
You know, I think state employees are more focused on Governor Snyder right now. I think it's more a concern of what's going to happen to the Civil Service Commission. He's going to get to replace Charles Block. He's one of the 4 commissioners in December. And I don't hear a lot about the Tea Party. I just hear things about Governor Snyder from our members. We've got some huge lawsuits that are sitting in the state Supreme Court right now. So those issues are, I think, more on state employees' minds these days. The Governor Snyder versus Mark Schauer race is basically sucking all the air out of the action, and I'd say for us and for me right now. I used to really be legislative liaison for the UAW Local 6000, and we represent 17,000 state employees, and a lot of our employees work for the Department of Corrections. They were not the food service workers, however. That was a different union, as they asked me. But we were against the outsourcing at many of those positions, and in fact, at the time, they were trying to outsource physical health and mental health within, at the time, 32 correctional facilities across the state, and we fought that off, and they did not do that, but they did outsource to food service workers, and that is something that comes up probably in every meeting I have. I was going to mention I was driving across up to Sault Ste. Marie and went across the bridge, and just for fun asked the person taking my toll gate money, I guess, you know, if she's a state employee. Of course, she said she was. She said her husband is fax a state employee too, and I asked her where her husband worked. She said Department of Corrections, and he's really upset because they outsource food service workers, and I believe he worked at Kinross, President, and they were really concerned about their safety and contraband coming in and all kinds of problems. And I went up to Sault Ste. Marie and met with some of our staff that work at the Kinross facility, and they just said that there's a lot of there's an underground market selling the food on the yard, and gangs are controlling the food lines. This is what they're saying. I mean, I'm not there. I don't know this. But they said that it's substantially worse than when state employees were there. But to answer your question, that does come up a lot. Today I was at the Grand Rapids Veterans Home, and we represent the doctors and the nurses that work there. And unfortunately, they outsource some of the direct care workers. Again, a different union, but we were against that. And you know, the same type of issues with quality of care, quality of service, when you outsource important state services like that. Those are things that really resonate with my members right now. And they realize if Governor Snyder gets another 4 years, we're afraid we're going to see more of that. You know, he still has not rescinded the contract on the food service after all the problems that have been documented. And so what does it mean? Our members know if he's reelected, what does that mean going over the next 4 years?
This is LCC Radio WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I wanted to follow up, Ray, for a second and ask you, there's also a fine that wasn't paid related to the problems with that contract. Is that right? You
know, John probably knows more about that than I do. I mean, I can just kind of tell you, like
sort
I said,
of a mini scandal,
we don't represent those workers, but I can tell you that the topic comes up.
Yeah.
Well, they were going to be fined in the spring, and then they pulled the fine. There's a variety of reasons why. We've been told that part of it was that that Aaron Mark was threatening to sue the state for failure to meet certain contractual agreements as well. So at that point, that fine was pulled back. However, they were fined later on several $100,000 based on continuing problems that occurred. And it's been a very, very difficult subject, even within the department. A lot of the managers have been struggling with, you know, trying to get this to work. Obviously, as Ray pointed out, you've had in other states problems that have occurred when food contracts were privatized. A friend of mine who did work in the Granholm administration told me once that Pat Caruso was the former director of corrections, said something I can't repeat on the radio, but
Language-wise?
but it had to do with the coffee. In other words, which is sort of a broad way of talking about the food, and you don't have carnal knowledge with the coffee, let's say, because it is now one of the few ways you can use to help maintain and control populations.
Yes.
Because a number of other rights and benefits and stuff have been pulled away over the years, and so you obviously, from a safety standpoint, and also from a standpoint of getting the prisoners to focus on trying to get their lives back in order, you need to have manageable situations. So, short term it has obviously not gone well. Long term, I guess we'll just have to see. And then you get into the basic theory about privatizing, or at least opening to bid,
Right.
Contracts and projects. There have been in the past, and Ray can certainly talk about this. The different groups have said, open it up, but let us bid too, and put it up so that everyone can go for it. And which I think for a lot of people that makes sense. If you can turn around, you can say, okay, you got to save X percentage, and they can come in and show an actual savings and show that they can do the job. Well, why shouldn't they be put to it?
Ray mentioned something too, and when I was talking to my not to be named friend in Southeast Michigan, he said there's a sort of a pushback on the governor too with veterans issues, which I hadn't followed, but he has many buddies in American Legions and VFW. I think he must go there for cheap beer. I don't know, but he said that they are not happy with him about veterans.
Well, there's been some issues that Ray already mentioned,
Yeah.
the Grand Rapids Veterans Home, and there have been some questions about how some things have been managed. It is curious because Governor Snyder actually did sort of lead the call before a number of other governors and other officials to say, we've got to do more to bring hire veterans, bring them back, get them back into everyday life, because there's no question they've been treated very, very poorly since they've come back. And as the point has been made, since so few people now are veterans, those of us who remember their parents or their grandparents were in World War II, Korea, and everyone was a veteran, pretty much. And they all understood that. Now it's a much smaller percentage of the population, and they have become marginalized to a large degree, which is very unfortunate given what we asked them to do. So
It's pretty sad that the statistics show now that more veterans have died because of suicide than they have died in the battles, and so that's an indicator of how badly they seem to be treated. One of my other concerns about right to work, Ray, was that I think we need to spend a little time more on that issue, because that galvanized everybody to the point that we had, efforts to try to recall the governor. That was a very big deal a few years ago, but it seems some of the energy of that issue has dissipated. I'm not clear that people realize, though, that no matter who wins or loses in this situation, the Governor Snyder is still going to get to name the people on the Civil Service Commission, and they could simply change the rules?
Well, there's 4 civil service commissioners, and I mentioned, I think before, in December he's going to replace Charles Blockett, who's one of the commissioners, and his he's voted, I would say, more of a pro-state employee history. I believe he's technically an independent, but he seems to be pretty. He appreciates, I believe, the collective bargaining process, so he'll be replacing him. And the concern we would have is state employees. We bargain because of rules of the Civil Service Commission, and we're different than other public employees. They're under PARA, Public Employees Relation Act, but the state workforce is under civil service. And so if you had 3 out of the 4 commissioners didn't think that, for example, state employees should be able to bargain for their wages, they could change a rule, and we could not do that. And that's essentially what happened in Wisconsin. So right to work is one thing. You have an option to be in the union and to be upfront about everything. We've retained the vast majority of our members. Yeah. But becomes something completely different if you take away bargaining rights and start changing rules that basically take away our teeth and our power to speak out and to have to give workers a voice and dignity at work. So that's a big concern for us, is what's going to happen in the Civil Service Commission. I'm sure John follows that too and could give you details. But we're really interested in seeing who's become the governor, because also the governor, let's be for real, this is going to set the stage, even though you may have commissioners with different political leanings. They're going to kind of read the cues, who's the chief administrator, and so it makes a big difference who the governor is.
I happened to be one of the litigants with the ACLU in one of those lawsuits. I was a journalist trying to get into the Capitol that day and was blocked from doing so. I really was stunned. I had never seen the Capitol closed like that before. It was quite a surprise. So there are those issues about open meeting laws. I guess one of the other things that concerns me about what seems to be happening in Michigan is that our ballot proposals, we have 2 of them on there now for wolves, they're probably in many ways moot as a result of actions that the legislature has taken since. And I guess I'm seeing, from my perspective, and I'd be interested to hear what you had to say about this, John, a diminution in the impact of ballot proposals in 2 ways. First of all, I think fewer of them have any hope of making a difference because the legislature can come in. Now they seem to be quicker to attach a finance bill so that it blunts the ability of the ballot proposal to take hold. But even in something like medical marijuana, for example, the voters by 60-some% voted for medical marijuana. I see people being busted all over. I mean, people who are in compliance with the rules, but because of things like forfeiture, where they can lose all of their property, regardless of whether they're later found not guilty, the federal government comes in and the state government comes in and they seize property. And that's a very sort of lucrative business for the state to be in. The DEA, I know because I used to go down to some of the meetings when I was in criminal justice and listen to Anton Valukas, the Chicago city attorney, basically say, we're just like Robin Hood, except we're kind of the sheriff of Nottingham. He said, we're on the other side. And it was kind of, he looked a little stunned after he had made that admission. I mean, it seems like the ballot proposals, they're not what they once were, and they don't seem to take effect.
Well, this year is unusual in that we just have the 2, and they both are related to wolf hunting. And as you say, you want to get into an hour-long discussion of how this works, you can just go into this.
We did. We had the head of the Humane Society, and we did.
It is essentially moot because of the initiated act that was passed, and of course we have a little bit more liberal structure in terms of what people can petition for than other states. In terms of the point that you made, there have been so many changes in terms of technology and finance and how people approach things from a legal political philosophy. Words matter. There's a court case, and I'm sorry to say I can't cite it exactly, but it says every word has meaning and every meaning has to be followed. Yes. I guess full disclosure, I did not vote for the medical marijuana proposal for a number of reasons, but probably the primary one was I read through it and I thought, this is screwed up, and this will be a mess. And it has been.
Right, a lot of people argue that.
And I understand what they were trying to do, but the problem is now you do have to have an extremely good technical knowledge of how to write things if you're going to do something which is going to be subject to very, very strict interpretation, as was this. In terms of getting things and getting them to stick, that is one reason why over the last several years you've seen so many people go the constitutional amendment route. A very good example of that is embryonic stem cell research.
Yeah.
Because an initiated act, even though it is considered of higher precedence than a legislative act, can still be amended and eventually repealed so long as the legislature meets the supermajority requirement. And when you're dealing with certain things like embryonic stem cells, for example, a number of people said, is this the sort of thing you really want to put in a constitution? And a lot of people said, no, but we don't feel we have a choice.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure why there weren't any other interesting ballot initiatives this year. There were, of course, a few that were attempted and didn't go anywhere, like once again a part-time legislature, and I am astonished that has never been able to get on the ballot over decades and decades and decades.
We got term limits, which I always thought was equally as dumb an idea.
Maybe term limits is, made people think we don't need a part-time legislature. I don't know. You know, I'm kind of interested that we have not seen an effort for, oh gosh, almost 20 years to try to put the death penalty back on the ballot. You know, so there were a couple of evergreen proposals.
I'm just surprised
there.
we don't have death with dignity on the other side, because we're seeing now with the Maynard case.
We did have that back in like 1998.
Yeah.
And that failed. And I would not be surprised to see at some time that issue come up again. Now, we know, we were talking about Emily Devendorf earlier, that depending on what happens with the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which I live in dread terror, they're going to issue their decision tomorrow, which would, I'm just opening the window and walking out. That's it. I can't go after that. And or whatever the U.S. Supreme Court decides finally to do, there's a very good chance in 2016 of an initiative to repeal the 2004 ban on same-sex marriage, which may even happen anyway, even if the courts rule that this ban does not stand, just so they can get it off the books. And so we'll see.
Did we take a run at trying to have a ballot issue for legalization of marijuana?
Oh yeah, they always
screwed it up.
They always take a
right.
One does not want to be unkind, but one wonders sometimes. I met a fellow who actually, this is for the East Lansing initiative that didn't happen.
Right, that's the one that's delayed here.
But I suspect that he was not unusual compared to some of them, and he came up to us and he wanted us to sign the petition. And I have because I'm a reporter, I have a hard and fast rule. I don't sign petitions, and I explained that to them, and mostly they're okay. And he says, "Well, okay, want to watch me ride my unicycle?" And I said, he said, "Here, come here, over here." And he got his unicycle out, and he was riding around with his unicycle, and I thought
it was an either or, eh?
And I thought, well, if this thing
67,
if they don't get enough petition signatures, I think I might know why. So.
But they have a bunch of active people. The unfortunate part is they keep going around and around and around with the same folks. I suspect.
Well, they have not quite gotten into the high-tech voter ID methods that the Democrats, the Republicans are using now. You know, so.
This is LCC Radio WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We are talking with John Lindstrom of the Gongwer Report and also with Ray Holman of the UAW. And I'd like to switch gears a bit and ask you. I'm watching East Lansing native son Nate Silver with his 538 blog and the Real Clear Politics people and Sam Wong out of Princeton duke it out about whether, I mean, there are still discrepancies on what the polls are showing in various places. Bill and I were just talking earlier, we don't seem to think that, and maybe we're wrong, that there are as many polls being done in Michigan as there may be in other states. Are we seeing a lot of polling here, and is the polling, who's paying for our polls? Are news organizations here not paying for as many as they once did?
I think you're still seeing the usual suspects doing polls. I think one of the reasons why you're not seeing some of the polling that you're seeing in other states is because nationally the focus is all on what's going to happen to the U.S. Senate. And because it seems like
so they're just leaving us.
We're pretty clear here on what's going to happen with the U.S. Senate race. You're not seeing some of that like you do in Iowa or North Carolina or Georgia or Colorado. In terms of the gubernatorial race, there have been quite a few different polls. There have been polls paid for by different interest groups. Depending on the interest group, the poll seems to kind of follow what they're interested in. So it's very hard. And of course, you want to get into a subject about survey research these days is very, very tricky and gotten into all kinds of different areas. And one thing, I don't know how many exit polls there will be tomorrow.
Oh, that's
if any.
An interesting question.
And one of the reasons why there may not be many is because of the absent voter situation. Because if you're going to do an exit poll and try to get absent voters, you got to do it a different way. You're not actually standing at the polls.
Right.
You have to call people, and that's a very. And then nowadays, with so many people having just cell phones, it's a much more difficult and expensive effort to try to pull together the numbers for the basic data that you want to generate. So. it's at some point we'll get this all figured out, I'm sure.
You know, polls will probably, at some point, and you kind of suggested, be replaced by big data. You'll have a better feel using big data analysis than you will polling. 'Cause
See
polling
who's
and
searching
cell
for
phone-
what and see which search terms they're using and being able to analyze those because, I mean, that's how the CDC replaced its survey for the flu in the fall with just looking at search terms on Google, and they can tell faster where the outbreaks are, who's being hit, and therefore they can get a bigger jump on what kind of vaccine to build for that year.
You may be very well right, that you will see that. I know only because I was someplace where the proceedings of the American Survey Research Council was a giant book, you know, like a telephone book, if that means anything to anybody anymore, and going through, and it was all about how do you conduct survey research now, given all of the technological changes there are.
We were talking about that. I mean, the young people that I checked in my classes and asked whether any of the young people had been polled, and none of them had, and I didn't expect them to because they're the cell phone generation. They're also the first-time voters, so they're not the likely voter because the likely voter is calculated on did you vote before? Well, they couldn't have. They were too young to vote before, so they don't fall into that category. So, I mean, they're not as well. I mean, and so people like Nate Silver are trying to figure out what algorithm do we apply to adjust this poll for the fact that it's short on this group or short on that group. And that's getting to be such a sophisticated science, and there's so much debate within the field about what algorithms shouldn't be applied, that it really, that sort of math leaves me with crossed eyes, and I'm not too sure where we're headed with that. It would be kind of fun every once in a while, though, to see an election that surprised people, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, I mean, we have seen that. It's been a while. I mean, you go back to 1990 when John Engler won.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's it's been a while since you've seen a dramatic shift that happened at a late turn.
Right.
So.
I mean, we see the Michael Bennett situation out in Colorado a few years ago, but not here. I mean, that was a real surprise. So that's on some of those. I mean, they have to pick up 6 states, and the GOP does in the Senate. And the predictions are right now on the part of the pollsters who seem to know things that between 75 to 90% assurance that the GOP will walk away with the majority in the Senate after this. And I think it really raises all sorts of questions about issues that may or may not resonate here. I mean, we could see Ferguson decision there immediately after, and all sorts of issues come up immediately after the election that'll raise real questions about if Ruth Bader Ginsburg decides to leave, or, I mean, we have a couple aging justices. Are they going to be able to get them through the Senate? It's going to be quite an interesting era.
What's going to happen in the Supreme Court race?
Well, Murphy,
Michigan
Bernstein, and Thomas are going to win. So, that will help us out a great deal.
You say that without bias.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
I was going to ask you.
What are the polls showing?
What polls?
See, that's it.
There have been a couple of polls, and the winner almost inevitably is who? Look, Justice Zara and Justice Viviano have an enormous advantage, as does any sitting justice, and that is that they have underneath their name Justice of the Supreme Court on the ballot.
Right.
And so you have to think the odds are going to favor them winning their seats. Richard Bernstein has put one ton of money into this thing.
He's got name recognition.
Like 10, 12 billboards here in Lansing.
Yes,
yeah.
he has put $1 million of his own money up to this point, and we have no idea, you know, when you count it out, how much extra money is going to be coming in from the other obviously well-to-do members of his family and other people. Plus he has a slogan which he thinks is going to work, you know, the blind justice thing. Judge Murphy, lately it's been interesting. There's been sort of some move his way a little bit in terms of some endorsements and people going out there and trying to do a little bit more for him, but you know, in his case, I think it's a matter of too little, too late, and so I would not be surprised. Now, you get to a point, any situation could happen. I will tell you this: I do not think Judge Thomas is going to win against Justice Viviano. But if I were a betting man on anything other than the lotto, I would say probably, and for the 8-year seats, it will be Justice Zara and Richard Bernstein.
I've had the pleasure of listening to Richard Bernstein a few times now. He's a very charismatic speaker. I don't know if you ever had a chance to listen to him speak, and he's a marathon runner, and I think he's going to win. But going back, you were talking about the high tech and the polling.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny too, because for me and for us, Local 6000, this has sort of been a throwback. This is really a ground game deal. This is really the door-to-door, the type thing. I feel, who am I? But I think there's momentum. I think in the last few weeks there's been some real momentum going towards Mark Schauer. And I think that our members just need to show up and vote. One person, one vote, and show up. And one thing for us, Bonnie, state employees, we actually get to vote for our boss. And I've been telling our members that, hey, if you remember your civics
This is a dangerous
class,
concept.
we're in the executive branch of government. And when I was first hired in 23 years ago, I used to get a real check, and I used to say John Engler on it. And I remind people, now everything's electronically deposited.
Right.
But it would say, Rick Snyder. And so that's your boss. You have the opportunity to get out there, and vote.
Ah.
I never thought of that when I worked in state government.
Yeah.
Good point. It's your boss.
Well, I was reading the other day that this election, even though it's an off-year election, is going to be $4 billion nationwide. A lot of that money is going into TV ads that I think everybody's mind has gone numb and they don't even register anymore. So you have to question whether it pays to put more money in the ground game than it does in the ads after a while. A lot of dark money is still coming in, money from sources we aren't too sure about with a lot of ads. But
Now,
a lot
where
of
did
the ads
that
were
phrase
locked.
"dark money" come from?
Oh, I don't know, but I like it so well.
Well, because this is, you go back and read Orwell's essay on political language, and just one more phrase that has suddenly showed up in the political sound science and rule of law judges.
Those of us who see the corrupting influence of corporations getting their hand in there love that phrase.
So now we have dark money. But no, you're right.
But you need to beat with a big stick, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The Brits spend $100 million in comparison. So when we look at it, that's $4,000 million that we're spending on this election. And think of all the things
I had
we could be
a
using.
discussion with somebody today, and I'm always baffled by why people say, why are elections so long, and why are there so many ads? And there are very few major democracies in this planet where you always know when the next election is. You know every single election that is coming up. It will always be the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November. It doesn't matter the year, because in the odd number of years it's mayors and some governors, and the next year it's, it is all. And so we have developed in this country, we have two types of politics. We have electoral politics, which we've gotten really good at, and we have policy-making politics, which we're not so good at. Parliamentary systems, they always have a time frame by which they have to have an election, but the government can fall if they fail to get certain votes in.
It's up for grabs.
Or the government can decide they're going to hold an election because it's politically to their, and they can choose a time. They can say we're doing it in the spring, or we're doing it in the summer, or we're doing it in the fall, and it's a shorter time period. So, and their party structures are much more powerful than they are here. So they have a lot more to say about who's going to be the candidate. They can plant candidates in various places, even though they're not from that area. But we don't do that here. And that's how we've set up our political system. And as we've talked about, technology and psychology and money and the financial interests that everybody has, I'm not sure that you'll ever see a change in this.
This is the first year, too, when I opened up my Facebook page, every time I saw a political ad.
Yes,
I
went to M Live
time.
and kept refreshing today to see who would come up. And I got Zara a few times, and then I got Todd Haywood, and I thought to myself, it's the only time that you would see in a trustees race, and I know Todd, he's running for LCC Board of Trustees here, that he raised enough money to be able to do online ads and M Live, and he chose to go that route because he can't afford TV ads, but
and he couldn't buy them if he had the money, probably.
Right, that's been locked up for a long time, I assume. But when you think about it, it's even now filtering down to races that previously you didn't see those kinds of ads.
Thomas Morgan.
Yeah.
I thought he owned my Facebook page for a while. And he's running for local school board. Every time he was there.
So school board is now using it.
Driving here, one of the candidates for Jeff Ray is running for East Lansing School. He's got billboards up. When did you ever see a school district candidate have billboards up?
How can this be? I mean, are people just deciding that they're frustrated, they want to put money into campaigns now more, or they just didn't ask before? I don't know what's going on.
It is now, you know, I mean, Ray was talking about the door-to-door and stuff. Well, even the door-to-door is different now. I mean, a Democratic activist came through my neighborhood the other day, and he went to the house next door, and he went to this house, and then he went down the street, and he went to that house. They're not hitting every house anymore.
No,
they don't
they're not,
have
are
to.
they?
Because every time he went to a house, he pulled his
Card.
phone out, he looked at which one he was going to.
Cards, what am I saying? Cards.
Well, cards, I mean, even
They
5-6
used-
years
yeah,
ago.
5,
they would,
6
they would
years
have,
ago, yeah.
But now it's that much more specific.
Yeah.
You were talking about big data. And so, but of course, the guys running for the local districts, they can't afford that necessarily. They can't necessarily, if you're
Right.
running for city council in a small city. So maybe, hey, maybe a few targeted billboards, because they're now electronic and they can change the message all the time. You know, you don't
Yeah,
have
you don't have to paste them up
yeah,
there
you don't have the
anymore.
guy up there hanging up there pasting the thing up anymore. Why not? But I mean, that was the first for me. I've never.
I had a young woman in my class who was an Obama person back in '08, and even then, what they had was an iPad where, when they got to the house, they knew the exact ages of the people in there, and depending on the person who answered the door, they could tell who it was. And they had a series of short 1-minute YouTubes that they could pull up on the iPad for, if it was the retiree, they showed them what the positions were on retirement. I mean, that's a very sophisticated operation when you can do that kind of thing. It's kind of borderline creepy if you're... I mean, it's kind of like next will be infrared, and they can tell what room you're in, and if you're hiding out and not answering the doorbell, that's what I figure's coming next. They'll throw a smoke bomb in to get you out there. The old days of just doing a literature drop on the doorknob doesn't make any difference anymore, I suppose.
I saw one when I picked my grandson up, who's with us in the studio tonight, in Ann Arbor today, on his father's door, a knob hanger. There was a long hanger for Debbie Dingle and a couple others. I haven't seen one of those in a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, I've gotten, actually, it was kind of interesting. The other day, for the East Lansing School Board, somebody went through our neighborhood we live in the Bailey neighborhood, so it was people who were involved in the Bailey Neighborhood Association, and it was kind of nice. We should probably keep it as a souvenir, because it was you know, printed out in their computer, had a couple of handwritten signatures on it, and said, you know, we would like you to vote for this person. And,
It's almost nostalgia time, isn't
and
it?
they did that, and they decided to go around the neighborhoods and just put those in the doors, and you don't see that anymore.
Where's the next generation of leaders coming from in the state? Are people more or less reluctant to get involved in politics based on, I think, it becoming less and less appealing when you see a lot of the frustrations and the problems, and it seems like not much is getting accomplished? Is it exciting? I don't see young people in my classes anymore as excited about political journalism as many of them used to be. I don't think it's it's not a growth career right now, and that may be part of it, but they don't seem to, you have to recruit student interns, I'm assuming, for, are you seeing a fire in people's bellies for this kind of work?
Most people that we've talked to about internships, they are very interested in political reporting. Of course, it has changed dramatically. I mean, we're still obviously sorting out how media is going to work and the effect and impact it will have. Where the next generation of leaders is going to come from, well, I expect where every generation of leaders has come from, it's going to come from people that are pissed off about something and decide they're going to have to do something about it, and something that affects them. I mean, you do have those people that want to be in politics because they see that as their version of a noble profession, something that like going into the ministry or going into medicine or something like that, something that provides a service. However, I think by and large, most people, and this is not a criticism, I think this is just reality, most people have some issue that needs to be dealt with, whatever that is. Their kids' schools, or their parents need help, or, we need to get that stop sign put in that corner or something like that, and that's what generates it.
That's where I think the raising the money issue really hits home. I'm plenty pissed off about a lot of things. As anybody knows, I'm a real crank on a lot of issues. And I ran with the Green Party in 2000, so I mean, I ran for the 8th district seat here. But I wouldn't run again seriously just because of the amount of money that you have to raise. I mean, I'm Eric Schertzing, much as we'd see him once a month talking here, I've heard from him even more because he calls me asking for money all the time. I mean, every candidate out there is just calling people. Bill says because he can't even go to his email inbox anymore because he's flooded with, they're going to get us, the sky is falling, if you don't give us $50 by midnight, we're dead in the water. And
this was years ago. My father gave, when John McCain was running for president in 2000, my father gave a few $100s. And my brother's a political consultant, and my father called my brother finally, almost in tears, saying, "Get them to stop. Why are they doing this?" And my brother said, "How much did you give?" And it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it tipped the threshold.
Oh, it sure did.
And so Dad was on everyone's target list.
Oh, yeah.
So
I better ask my spouse.
Uh-oh.
Maybe I know
Maybe
it wasn't
it's
me.
her. Ah.
But Pelosi loves us. I mean, we've become such great friends with so many people.
Well, you don't even have to donate now. I mean, I get because of course I have to follow everybody.
Right.
I get fundraising appeals from every spectrum, every party, just about, except the Greens. I think haven't asked for money, but
just never were organized enough. They were too busy twinkling. That was another.
But
thing.
I've even seen like a libertarian person ask for money, and
Whoa.
The technology now makes it. If they can track you, as you've said. They can track you. They can see what you're interested in, and if you show any interest in politics, bang, you're going to get hit. And if you try to look at both sides, you're going to get hit by both sides. So
I thought the libertarians just went straight to the Koch brothers with their hat in their hand.
Speaking of the Green Party, though, does a candidate for MSU trustee, Terry Link, have a chance? Do you think can an independent win a trustee or a regent now, or
can they or will they?
Both.
Okay, yes. Will this person win? Yes,
both.
Probably not. Although this person could make a bigger impact than probably any other minor party candidate. The way we have it structured in this state, pretty much it's going to go however the straight party voting goes in terms of who wins. You've had very rare circumstances, and it usually involves an enormous controversy at a university where an incumbent doesn't win, or the person you thought was going to win didn't win, and that just happens pretty rarely. Can they win? They need organization, they need money, and they need to be. They just need to be out there all the time, talking to people, building up the image, building up the whatever they want to do.
This is LCC Radio WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're doing our sort of pre-election wrap-up. I think one of the things that someone like a Jesse Ventura proved is that there is a possibility, I still think, out there for an internet candidacy to take off. If you were really shrewd about doing fun videos, funny videos, the things that might go viral, that you could still, with a relatively low budget, be able to pull off a coup like that. I think the reason that Joni Ernst is doing so well, for example, in her campaign for Senate, is because of the pig castrator ad. That gets picked up for free, and everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
It makes her seem so personable and folksy. It's the kind.
We're doing doors just for fun. You constantly tweeting other people. You're on the doors. It's a nice sunny day to outsource Governor Snyder, stuff like that. And I don't know, it's going to make a difference between who wins or loses, but at least it makes it more fun to be out on the streets if you're, tweeting people across the state who are doing the same type of thing. But to answer your question, yeah, we have, like the UAW has a Give Me 5 program where they send text messages to people. They have, obviously Facebook. We have a Facebook site, UAW Local 6000 does. So we're using it more and more and more. And I think it's a good way, actually, for unions to organize, especially for us, where we have over 1,200 work sites. The UAW Local 6000 does. So we have to rely on electronics and social media. Otherwise, it's really difficult to reach everybody. So definitely. And I think it's been a plus. I think actually it's helped us organize. And it's actually going to help us, I think, keep our union strong moving forward into right to work. So it's going to be real interesting to see that third year of right to work, what happens, and for us, what happens with civil service. But I think the social media is a tool we're going to use. It's not the only tool, and it doesn't replace the face-to-face. And it's real interesting for me, because I do door knocking on my own, and then I talk with my members when I get a chance to in district meetings. But I'm definitely more effective, and it's not a surprise, I would suppose, talking to my own members. They know me as a state employee. I've worked in the department there, and that carries a lot more weight. So that's another thing unions can do. We can talk to our own members and galvanize our people. And with social media, it's just one more tool to keep that together. Start an electronic relationship, and then back it up later with face-to-face.
Social media is changing pretty dramatically too, and a lot of my students are complaining right now that it's difficult for them. Many of them keep saying, I just feel so ignorant. I'm afraid to go vote because I know that down ballot I don't have a clue on any of these races. I may know a little bit about the governor's race, but I don't have a clue.
One thing too, so the UAW has UAWendorsements.org, UAWendorsements.org, and it's a great site because you can go to it and put your county on. Ingham County, it's a drop box. All the endorsements are there. Shiawassee County, Crawford County, any county. And so that's really nice to go around, so they can have that and print it out, and they know who to vote for. So that's something where it's helped. Instead of, we still print out hard copies and pass them out. But
they really want explainers. They don't understand all of the issues. They hear the slogans, but they don't know what's behind them. They know some of it is dog whistle for certain issues that they're kind of clueless about. I hear a lot of complaints from them that they have a lot of difficulty navigating social media. We're seeing women dropping off Twitter. There's been, there's been this sort of growing misogyny on Twitter. A lot of women are leaving that service, going to others. So it's constantly in flux. It's hard to know. And I think what we really are in dire need of is explainer sites that give more background on issues.
They could sign up for Gongwer.
They could indeed, yes. Is there a student rate that's really, really, really cheap?
Yeah, then all of a sudden I have a feeling everyone would suddenly be a student
I bet they would.
in this world. There are sites out there. They are admittedly hard to find sometimes. You pointed out the issue that really has to be always, people have to remember, is you take away the ads, because to a large degree the ads are theater. Yeah. You can lie by telling the truth, and that's what people do. They all do it, all sides do it. The thing that you have to remember is, as a voter, you have to be the one who's responsible for learning and getting the issues. And it ain't easy, but it ain't necessarily supposed to be easy either. And what I've always told people is, if you don't know who to vote for, ignore the ads. What are the things that are most important to you? Make a list of 5 of them. And then the best that you can, by going through the websites, by reading the media, by watching the media, by talking to other people, figure out which candidates come closest to where you feel should be done in those 5 areas you think are most important.
Something that happened this year, at least I noticed, Detroit Free Press, Michigan Chronicle, both endorsed Governor Snyder, which surprised a lot of people. But do newspaper endorsements matter that much anymore?
They do and don't. Obviously newspapers aren't as read as much as they used to be, but they still add a great deal of credibility in the public mind, which is why you will see ads, as Governor Snyder has done, with the list of all of the endorsements behind them. It's important that you have it. How you got it, why you got it, is maybe less important because people don't, and I would certainly recommend that people read the Free Press endorsement editorial to, see how tortured it was for them to reach the decision that they reached. But
it was one of the least positive endorsements I've ever read.
But
he was not a child molester. It was the oddest thing I've ever read.
But the point is, it doesn't matter. I got it.
Yeah,
right. I can put it on my list.
Put it in your ad.
I'm there.
It's kind of like a movie review.
Exactly.
Right.
You get the worst movie review you could imagine in New York Times, and it ends up on your
You take
poster.
one word.
Take
That's
one
right,
to superior.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's to a large degree what people do. As I say, it's not an easy process.
But I think for young people it's particularly difficult because they say, you can't drop me in the middle of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and expect me to know which side to pick because I have too much background. So you know what they tell me? I am going to vote straight ticket. I'm going to vote with my parents' vote. And I thought, we all know statistically that's what they do, but I've never had them be that honest about it. Because they're finding it, you'd think with the social media out there and the rest of the tools, that they would say it's easier for our generation to learn more. And instead, they simply feel there's too much information out there. I'll never be able to wade my way through it. I don't even know.
Well, and that's the odd thing about, I mean, this has nothing to do with it, but that is the odd thing about the media today. And I've had people come up to me and they are slaves to news. I mean, they watch Fox or CNN or MSNBC. They read everything that's available on the web, and they're utterly confused and they don't know what to do. And I say to them, I'm a professional journalist. I have to do this for a living. I've done this for a living for more than 40 years. There is no way on God's earth I would watch cable news non-stop, that I would read only newspapers and magazines non-stop. You have to take a break. You have to walk away. You have to go to a movie or read a mystery or a science fiction book.
Or maybe get some labor news. Is there a labor news still? There used to be a thriving labor news in this state.
Well, yeah, I agree with John. You do need to take a break, and I'll tell you what, I'll be happy Wednesday, because I'm not sure if we're going to get an answer who wins the election anytime soon on Tuesday. What do you think about that, John? Do you think we're going to know?
Hard to say. Hard to say.
In terms of the Senate?
I mean, well, no, in terms
of governor.
Governor,
really?
yeah.
I'd be very surprised if we have a 1990 situation where it went to like noon on Wednesday before.
Wow.
But I will not be surprised to see it go quite late. I am, and you know, in the past we always used to say if it was done by midnight, you were feeling good because you could sort of keep the buzz on till 3 a.m. by the time you finish.
That's not good news because I've got an 8 o'clock class on Wednesday morning. Thank you very much to John Lindstrom and Ray Holman. We'll do our election wrap-up next Monday night. This is LCC Radio WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. You've been listening to Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie Bucqueroux and Bill Castanier. We appear every Monday night at 7 p.m. Make sure to tune in next Monday. We'll see you then. LCC Radio. Thank you.